Hey, in today's video, let's talk about what is the theory of constraint, also known as TOC. We'll talk about what is it, what are the pros, what are its cons, and what are the best use cases for this theory. The theory of constraints is a management paradigm that focuses on identifying the main constraints or bottlenecks in a process or in a system and tries to iron them out. So it tries to improve them so the overall output of the system is better, or actually improves it to the point that you are actually achieving the goal that you have envisioned for that system in the beginning. There are going to be several key concepts in theory of constraints. The first one is system thinking. You want to view your organization as an interconnected system and not just a collection of parts. The second is that you want to identify the constraint or the constraints, because sometimes there are going to be quite many, and that's probably going to be most likely the case for you. But you want to identify the first constraint that is limiting the output of your system. Then you want to exploit the constraint. You want to maximize the output that you can provide because of this constraint that is affecting your system. Then you want to subordinate everything else to support the constraint. So you want to basically align all the other processes that you have in your system to support that constraint. And finally, you want to elevate the constraint. You want to find solutions to potentially remove or reduce that constraint that you have in your system. And when I talk about system, you don't have to think about systems as just processes in a factory, for example. You can also think about processes or journeys or different activities that you have within your software, different processes that you perform within your software. So for example, I think that a good example of a system that you could be looking into with theory of constraints, it's the funnel that you create from discovery of your product all the way to purchase of your product through, for example, some kind of e-commerce. So that journey that is going to help identify your customers what the value of your product is, test that product, identify the value themselves, find if this product is the one that fits their needs, and from there even go all the way to the process of purchasing and starting to adopt that product as part of their solution. So now let's go through what are the pros and the cons for theory of constraints. The first pro is that you are going to focus on the most critical bottleneck that you have in your system. So basically it helps you prioritize your efforts effectively. The second pro is that it promotes continuous improvement in your way of working. It helps you to focus all the time in incrementally making your solution or your product or your system better one constraint at a time. The third one is that it's going to increase your throughput. By addressing those constraints, basically you are going to improve the output of your software or of your system in a continuous way. So imagine what I was talking earlier, you are going to make sure that more people are going through that journey of testing your product and potentially even purchasing your product. You are going to make that a more healthy pipeline, a more healthy funnel. The fourth one is that TOC can potentially reduce lead times. So by streamlining your processes and the system that you're building, your cycles typically are going to be shorter. And the fifth one, from a business perspective, you're probably going to have an enhanced profitability. You are going to have an easier process, a more effective process, a more efficient and also profitable, obviously, process that potentially is going to bring more items through that pipeline. The items can be many things, as you can imagine. So there are really great aspects and benefits to the theory of constraints. But now let's go through the cons, because there are some of them, and some of them are quite important as well. The first one is the complexity. Trying to define everything as a system or as a kind of a funnel that you have to try to understand where there are constraints might be more challenging than expected. So I would recommend, at least the best is that you just try to concentrate on one type of funnel at a time and not try to fix everything, because that might be bringing you to a very complex model. So especially when you are in a large organization, the processes might be quite intricate, meaning that it might be very difficult to identify all the potential bottlenecks. The second one is that it requires strong leadership, mainly because you really had to have the support of your management, your leads, to take this approach because you are really going to focus on how to improve a funnel, not necessarily on demands that you are hearing or potentially from outside. So you're just looking the whole process as a system, and you're just trying to improve that system, and you're not maybe necessarily talking to outside. That's potentially a problem. In any case, you're going to need a strong commitment from your leadership and also a committed team to be able to deliver or to implement these changes. The next con, and probably one of the biggest ones for me, is that it is a short-term point of view or short-term approach. You are just focusing on improving the current pipeline, the current system, the current process. And here, basically, what you're trying to do is to improve the current process that you have, but you're not taking a new, potentially, approach of or question that is my process the correct one? Because maybe your process is not the correct one, and the best solution will be to change the process altogether. Now, with this approach, with theory of constraints, what you're looking for is to improve the current process. So you have to learn to balance out the short-term and the long-term strategic goals. I'm not saying anyways that is not a bad thing. I think that especially when you have developed a new process, a new feature, the best way to improve it and to develop in an iterative way could be theory of constraints. And I think that there's a very good place for this approach. But when it comes to relatively older systems or relatively older processes or features or products, taking this approach potentially might be preventing innovation. And finally, another con is something that probably affects to pretty much every single framework out there is resistance to change. Anytime that you try to do a change or a new way of working, implemented in your working place, there's going to be people that are not going to be super thrilled about it. And this is something that is going to come also, or that is going to be apparent as well with theory of constraints. So you will have to manage this. You will have to also identify who are the right people to help you drive this process. So now let's go through some of the best use cases for theory of constraints. So TOC has been applied over the years very successfully in many, many different use cases. One of the first ones that you can imagine is manufacturing. In manufacturing, you usually have a process line where you are producing different type of objects, let's call them. These kind of products can be, for example, cars, robots, or whatnot, production lines that you see in manufacturers. This production line usually is going to have different bottlenecks on it. And what you want to do with TOC is that you want to focus on one of those constraints and make sure that you are either removing it or that you are making it more efficient. Another use case will be using it in service industries. What you want to give is a better experience to your customers. You want to give a more efficient, less clutter, less maybe annoying experience to your users and make sure that they can achieve what they want to achieve with your service as soon as possible. This is very similar to the example that I was saying with the e-commerce. So if you want to purchase a product, or if you want to try it first and then purchase it, you want to make that experience as smooth as possible. And you don't want, for example, that the payment process is something that it's really difficult for them to go through. You want that those things move smoothly, that the user or the customer can have a good experience through them. You can see this service as a system. You can use TOC then to identify the bottlenecks and improve them. You can use it for project management or product management as well. When you think about a new feature or the feature development, once you have developed the first version of your feature, you could consider that as a system that you are seeing how your customers are using your new feature. And potentially think about as your feature or even a product as your MVP, the first version of that feature. And from there, you want to make a better experience and you want to identify those constraints that are preventing your customers to have a better experience or achieving their goals in a better way. And you can use theory of constraints to identify those constraints, smooth them out, make sure that they have a better experience. And basically, this same would apply for project management. Another use case could be using in healthcare industry, where you could streamline patients' flow, reduce waiting times, and improve resource utilization. And finally, another good use case for TOC would be to use it with supply chain management, where you can optimize inventory levels, transportation, and logistics. So as a summary, I think that TOC, or theory of constraints, is a really good framework for you, especially if you are in the world of software development, when you want to either smooth the experience of your user in certain parts of your product, even within the product itself, so features that you have just released and you want to improve that experience, and also for the purchasing journey. I think that that's a really good case or use case where you could use something like theory of constraints. It can be not just for the purchasing process, but also for the promotion process. How do you get people from awareness to consideration of your product? How you get them to, first find your brand or your product that exists and that is out there, and then how they consider your product. And then you could connect that all the way to the purchase process, of course. And I think that is a great tool or a great framework to use when you want to make sure that you are iteratively increasing or improving the output of your processes or your features. So in the way that, hey, I have done my first MVP and now I want to improve that solution. I think that that's a great place for theory of constraints. If you want to rethink your product, if you want to make sure that you are stay competitive and that you're innovative, I don't think that theory of constraints is going to be the best solution. But maybe you think differently, and maybe you have used in different ways, or you have found different pros or cons to this framework. If you have any comments, please let us know in the comments below. If you want to know more about different frameworks that are used for software development and for other processes as well, go check out this playlist. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel. I will see you in the next one, and remember, stay safe.